Hi, I'm Micheal Killen. Parents have children and they all want to do their best to help their children to grow up to be fine, happy, productive human beings. Sometimes some parents find themselves with what is sometimes called a curious child. I have invited a psychologist, Sara Edrington, who has specialized, probably one of the nation's most experienced psychologists, helping to raise and helping her clients raise curious children. Sara.
Hi.
Or am I supposed to call you Dr. Edrington?
You can call me Sara. That works.
And so you are a psychologist.
I am. Mm-hmm.
And first, you practice roughly in San Rafael?
I do, yeah.
And that is on the northern eastern side of the Golden Gate Bridge in the great state of California.
Right. Yes.
How long have you been a psychologist?
I have been a psychologist now since 2002. Yeah, well, I became licensed in 2006, but we started practicing while I was in graduate school. That's a part of the program.
Practicing, in other words, in
clinical psychology. So out in the community, practicing at an internship.
Okay, and in your practice, it's not just curious children that you, but children and adults, young adults. Help me understand the scope or the content.
Sure, I was trained in working with children and teens and adults. Actually, that was a part of the program. And part of my training was actually working with children who had been traumatized. And I also worked in a shelter for families. And over the years, my practice has kind of developed into working with individuals who have been traumatized, and also, as well, people who are going through transitional periods, parenting, anxiety, and depression as well. And I would say in terms of working with curious children, parenting has always been an interest of mine, and I would say once I became a parent and I have a child who is extremely curious, that kind of turned into an area of interest for me.
I'm going to ask, before I ask you some technical questions, does your child like being curious?
That's a good question. She doesn't know anything else. I think that's how she sees the world. And she loves it. She loves to engage with people wherever we go. I would say one of the difficulties is at the end of the day, each day, because she's a sponge and she's taken in so many facts and has so many questions, and she's taken in a lot of emotions too, and ideas that are probably too advanced for her. Sometimes she has, at the end of the day, she feels pretty overstimulated. So that's a part of parenting a child like this is, how do they download when they have all of this information? How do they turn their brain off at the end of the day? And I know sleeping has been an issue in our house, a difficult issue for this reason.
Yes, and now you have training in psychology.
Yes.
What has been the most important approach or thing you have done with your child, or that you have done with your clients' children that are curious? And maybe you should first define curious.
Yeah, and that's just a term I had used. It was the curious child. But all children are curious, which is a natural part of development, right? To be curious about your environment. What does this taste like? What does this feel like? And ask questions. And then there's a group of children that have this insatiable thirst for knowledge. And that's the child that we can oftentimes identify because they're raising their hand the entire time during some sort of event, right? And teachers can clearly identify some of these kids. So, yeah, So there's a distinction, I would say. So again, all children are curious. That's a healthy part of development.
So when a child is born and starts out, you're saying they're all curious, but some
Right.
are more curious.
Mm-hmm.
Do they all move forward in life? Do the curious stay curious? Do the others who are not so curious, does something happen to them and they become more curious or less? What, I'm asking about the
Yeah,
environment, I guess.
exactly. That's what I was going to say. The environment plays a really big part. And I think that's where I come in. That's part of my role, is to work with parents, no matter, in terms of the spectrum, in terms of where your child falls in line, in terms of curiosity in life, is how to draw that out of your child. And a big part of that is finding out what their interest is, taking them seriously, not just kind of dismissing their question, but saying, like, investing some time and sitting down and asking them questions, finding out what they're interested in, and finding avenues for the children to be able to research and to be able to become excited about what they're excited in.
So if a child comes to you or the parent
Mm-hmm.
and the child has an epiphany,
Mm-hmm.
does your child have epiphanies?
Yes, definitely. Yes, for
And,
good epiphanies and sometimes epiphanies that feel really overwhelming.
and what you're helping the parents realize that it's good to listen clearly,
Right.
ask questions, and
Yes.
show interest, and certainly not shut the kid down.
Right, right. Exactly, which I know all parents are busy, and even for teachers. Teachers have, lots of kids to take care of. It's, finding that time, that quality time, to be able to take them seriously and say, like, tell me about what you're interested in. Or there are kids that they don't know what they're interested in. So for a parent, they can start by sharing their own interests with their child and taking them out into the community and getting some firsthand experience. And if your child is interested in something, I tell parents, you don't have to have all the answers. That's okay to not know, not be able to answer all of your kids' questions, because there are resources. There's the library, there are professionals, and I know with my child, in some of the areas she's been interested in, there have been so many adults and professionals that have been more than willing to talk to her and share their knowledge with her, which gets her even more excited that people, again, out in the community in the real world are
So I
taking
sort
this
of heard
seriously.
two things.
Mm-hmm.
Listen to the child,
Yep.
and then maybe steer the child, suggest resources
Mm-hmm.
where the child can go, and maybe with the parent,
Right.
where the child can get the answers to some of the child's questions.
Right. Yeah, definitely. And then their child feels like there's some agency, like they can also invest and feel excited about advocating for themselves and being able to, write a letter to somebody saying, hey, I have these questions, or an email. I would love to know more information about your job. Can you tell me about it?
So the third approach is sort of encouraging the child to realize it has agency.
Yes.
Oh, I'm using that word.
Right.
Okay, so we sort of have a third.
Mm-hmm.
And what about the parent who comes to you and says, I can't handle this.
Right.
This is around the clock.
Right.
What,
Yes.
how do you deal with that? Or what suggestions do you have with the parent?
So sometimes it's quality opposed to quantity. So find times to really connect with your child and listen to your child. And again, you're putting them in, helping them find avenues for the child to be able to do some research on their own. Finding books, there are amazing documentaries out there, and using the community. Again, I'm not sure parents really kind of tap into that resource so much, that there are other individuals in the community who would love to mentor and be involved in helping spark your child's curiosity and love for learning. Yeah.
Why do you think there are the people out there that are willing to be mentors?
Mm-hmm.
What motivates them, do you think, to be willing to take the time to share things and have patience with a child.
It feels almost like a symbiotic relationship I've seen between the child and mentors in the community. This idea, again, the child feels like they're being taken seriously, they're getting attention, they're finding out new information, and for the adult, it's this idea that a child is excited in their knowledge, that they're able to pass this on to somebody else, another generation, who may then take their ideas and take it further. I mean, that's kind of how development happens, right, and advancements in our lives.
And what about the curious child that goes to school with children that may not be as curious? Do you have any suggestions for the child or the parent to advise the child on how to interact with children that might not be as alive, you might say?
Precocious, yeah. You know, I would recommend the parents to talk to the school, the teachers, the administration. I think, advocating for your child, letting the teachers know right up front, this is how my child learns, and being obviously very empathic in terms of some of the plights of the schools, that there's a lot of kids in one classroom, but being able to say to the teachers, this is how my child learns. Can we come up with some ways that my child can, do some research on their own? They have some books, they can kind of dive in and keep school interesting and keep them excited about learning. And a lot of these kids love to engage with other kids. They can engage with older children at the school as well. And they have the opportunity to write down their questions, and they can have those questions answered later at another time. But just some tools. I think it doesn't have to be they get lots of individual time, but tools that they can stay stimulated.
Yeah, now I think in your profession, which of course I only have a little teeny bit of knowledge, you deal with emotions.
Right.
More so than logic.
Right.
And with respect to the curious child and the parent comes and says, my kid has these weird thoughts, but not dangerous thoughts or troublesome thoughts, but they're not logical. Do you have advice for them, or is that an issue at all?
Well, again, it depends on where the child is developmentally. And so let's say you have a really young child that is a sponge all day long and taking in the facts, but also a lot of the emotions in terms of some of their big thoughts and these big topics that they're diving into. It's hard for them to make sense of, again, kind of integrate, I should say, all of the information. So for parents, I tell them before bed, check in with your child. What do you think about today? What are you holding on to? Do you have any thoughts or feelings? The child has the opportunity to write these down. I tell parents, sometimes at the end of the day, you need to think outside the box. And you have a child that may want to write a letter to somebody that they're thinking about. They may want to write down all the questions they didn't have answered. They may need just other ways to self-soothe at the end of the day, and and feel connected and feel heard. Because, like I said before, it could definitely interfere with sleep and feeling a little overwhelmed.
Oh, interesting. So you're a psychologist. Do you like that profession?
I love my profession. I say, I never know who's going to walk through the door next.
Yeah.
And I think it's an honor to be in this profession.
That's wonderful. And well, you have been a wonderful guest. And I always like to hear when somebody has loved their profession, and it's an honor.
Yeah.
That's wonderful. And you've had, 5 years of college and then more, just roughly, how many years of work?
8 years of college.
8 years of
8
college.
years of college, right.
Yes.
Yeah.
Okay, and again, your practice is in San Rafael, California, just on the other side of the eastern side of the Golden Gate Bridge. And thank you very much. My guest, ladies and gentlemen, has been Sara Edrington. She's a psychologist, and she specializes in curious children and other topics. I'm Micheal Killen. Thank you very much.